Welcome to The Grand Balance, a bi-weekly podcast hosted by two working grandmas navigating the beautiful chaos of work and family. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Sharon.
I know you have sad news for us today. So do you want to tackle that first, or do you want to divert and come back?
Sure, let's go ahead and talk about it. So, all of you listeners, I don't know if I've spoken about my beautiful, wonderful chocolate lab named Jackie. We had to make the difficult decision this weekend to let her go. She was almost 14, and she was, I know everybody says this, but she really was the best dog ever, and it was really tough, and I am just getting over crying for the last 3 days. It was a lot more heartbreaking than I had remembered from my first dog.
I'll vouch, the dog was amazing. This kind of begs the question, how do you handle the passing of a pet with young ones, whether it be grandchildren or children or...
Yeah. So when we had finally made the decision, I had looked it up because, I have the grandson. Now he's little, but still I wasn't sure how he would react. And then also my 7-year-old niece, she really took it hard because she had spent a lot of weekends with me and with my dog. And so they had become buddies. That was almost like her first dog. So she just got her first dog recently. So Jackie has kind of grown up with her the last 7 years. And she cried and on the phone and she asked to come see her. And so I was looking it up to make sure, is this okay based on the age? So I can give you a little information from that research on kind of age appropriateness or how they feel at these certain ages.
I think that would be helpful for a lot of listeners because I know a lot of people are pet owners, and unfortunately these things do happen, and it's best to be prepared of the best way to go about it in dealing with young kids and explaining what's going on.
And a lot of grandparents have pets. I know that sometimes when you're busy in life with all your kids, you may not say you have time for pets, but a lot of grandparents, that's their companions in their later years. So I do think many children are going to be exposed to this at some point.
Oh, 100%. The majority of grandparents I know definitely do have a dog.
Yeah. So for infants and toddlers, they may experience some things. They don't really understand death yet. But you might start seeing aggressive behavior, explosive emotions, and you just have to reassure them and give them a loving voice to show that, you're there and show that you care for them. But they don't really understand what's going on. They just know something is strange in the home and they can sense either the sadness or the strong feelings and emotions that are happening around them.
I was going to say exactly that. They're probably more affected by the weird shift in emotions, knowing that something's going on, but they don't really know what it is.
That's right. When you get to ages 3 to 5, they also do not understand that death is final. They know their pet's gone, but they believe it's temporary. They think they could come back or they can do something to make them come back. So it's important, they say, to be pretty direct. You can read to the child from an age-appropriate book about loss and encourage them to share their feelings through play or drawing and things like that.
That's interesting. I didn't really realize that age group didn't understand the permanency of it. My daughter lost her kindergarten teacher, who my son at the time was 3, was also really close to her. And looking back now, that was really their first experience with loss. And I didn't have any idea that he thought it was not a permanent thing.
Right. Or maybe they are somewhere now, but they might come back.
Right.
So when you get into the ages of 5 through 8, they do understand that death is final, but they have difficulty imagining it on a personal level. So they may visualize death as an angel or a skeleton or a monster, which can get a little scary. So expect questions from them about, physical aspects of death, like what happens to their body when they die and things like that. And the best advice, they say, is to answer questions directly. And then, of course, to reinforce that their pet loved them and that it's okay to feel angry or other emotions, sad emotions. And that's kind of where my niece fell into. Like, she understood it was final, but she was having hard times showing emotion. She was crying over the phone, but in person, when she said her goodbye, she kind of froze up a little bit and started kind of nervously laughing. Like, she didn't know how to control her emotions.
Oh, poor thing. I'm sure she was nervous.
Yeah. And then ages 9 through 12, they do understand that death is final and that it's something that happens to everyone, and expect them, this age range, to ask many questions and to almost have a morbid curiosity about death. Like, they may seem that they're coping well, but you have to remember that preteens tend to keep many of their feelings hidden. So give them time to talk, share with them, let them express themselves, and let them ask as many questions as they want.
Makes sense. Really a sad situation, but it's always good to be prepared of how to handle it in the best way.
Yeah. And then ages 13 through 16, because as I mentioned, preteens kind of are closed up a little bit. Adolescents for sure are, and so they might not verbally express the intensity of their emotions. They're often mistakenly judged by their behavior reactions to grief, so they might try to mask their emotions from all of their closest friends, try to remain tough. But it's important that they also are able to grieve and told that it's okay to grieve, because they think of themselves as adults, so they feel like they have to be strong and not have to show those emotions. But we should be giving them permission to do that. I read this and I had forgotten, but my son, when my first dog died, also at 14, he was, he was probably 8 years old. And he didn't say much, but then I happened to be cleaning out his closet and I looked behind some clothes and he had put in paint, "I love," and then the dog's name with a sad tear on it in his
Oh, that would
closet.
break my heart.
Right. So he never showed emotion, but he was hurting, and I didn't know until I saw that. So it is just something to, keep your eye on when the kids are experiencing this.
Yeah, I'm so sorry you've had to go through that. I can't even imagine losing my dog. Never lost a pet, so I
Yeah.
appreciate the tips, and I hopefully won't have to use them for quite some time.
Well, the one other thing, and I know people are very different, that we did differently between this dog and our first one, is for this dog, we did do in-home pet euthanasia.
And I've heard nothing but excellent things about that. It's such a good tip.
Well, I had asked a friend who said he had it, but his wasn't a service. And I'm going to give a big shout out to Pause into Grace, PAWS, Pause into Grace. They were amazing. The vet that came in was so warm, so kind, so loving, so understanding. We got to be ourselves. We got to cry as much as we wanted. Our little Jackie got to pass in her favorite lounger, her leather recliner that she loves so much, and we just got to do it on our terms. Instead of, having to go into a vet, people know what's going on, you're feeling rushed, or I don't know, it was just a much different experience. But I talked to a friend of mine who had a vet who lived behind him, and he said he didn't like it because every time he looked at the place that his pet died, he always thought about her.
I was just going to ask you about the recliner.
You know what? I think the experience was so warm and loving that I don't think about that.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I don't think that, oh, this is the chair. I'm not constantly thinking about it. Now, of course, this is still raw for me. It was only 3 days ago. So, of course, at night when I close my eyes, I'm reliving it. So it'll take time. But I have to say, my vet, who'd been on vacation, she wasn't even here. She called yesterday and she tried to reassure me that I was making the right decision. And she said something that I'm going to really take to heart. She said, "You just need to know what a great parent you were, because you were willing to take the pain in your heart to take the pain away from Jackie. Take on that pain so that she can release that pain. And I just thought that was...
It's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah. So anyway, for those of you who have lost pets, I know how hard it is, and we all go through it, but there are things that we can do to help our children and grandchildren, try to get through it. We're having a hard enough time. Can you imagine what kids go through?
No, I think the tips are very valuable, and they'll be able to be used by a lot of people.
Yep. All right, let's change the subject.
Okay, we'll divert. We have a PSA, which I think is really important. Now that summer's approaching, this is something I had not thought of, and it really struck me when I found it. I want to give the proper credit. It's from a pediatrician named Dr. Katie, and it did not list her last name. But one thing we really need to be concerned with are garden hoses. Babies have had second or third degree burns because the water inside a hose when sitting outside can reach 140 degrees, hot enough to scald skin in less than a second. This is not something that I'd ever thought of. Although I know, like when I've grabbed a hose and water comes out, it is really hot.
Oh, it's scalding hot, especially here. We get in high temperatures being on the West Coast. And it's interesting, when we would grow up, we would ride our bikes and we would need water. You go drink out of the neighbor's hose. And I don't ever remember letting the water stream out until it got cool. I just remember turning it on. And
yeah, I do too. That's strange that maybe it was an issue and they were used so often that the hot water had already been out.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's something I hadn't occurred, and I thought it was really important to spread awareness about this. It did give some tips of how to protect your child, and it says store hoses in the shade whenever possible. Choose lighter colored hoses. Greens, blues absorb less heat, where a black or a darker hose is going to absorb a lot more heat and heat up the water. You should always turn on the hose first, test it, and then make sure it's cool before a child gets near, which I feel is obvious.
But if you're in a hurry and
that's
what
true.
If that child turns it on himself?
I was going to say, or the kid runs over there and turns it on. It is good to make sure that they're aware of the dangers as well. So that's something I think we all need to think about. Speaking of going into summer, I have a fabulous find. My fabulous find in the theme of summer and getting ready for summer is something called Solar Buddies, and there are different brands, but this is one that we've used and really liked. It's a sunscreen applicator that rolls on like a sponge. You put whatever sunscreen you have that's safe for the kids, and it rolls with a sponge, so you're not just rubbing sunscreen on kids, and it makes it so they're not complaining about you rubbing. It kind of makes it a fun little activity.
Is it like a paint roller?
Kind of. So it has a roller ball inside and a sponge.
Oh,
so the
like
sponge,
a little roller ball with deodorant.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the sponge disperses it, but the roller ball moves it along the skin. So kids, there's nothing worse than trying to put sunscreen on a young kid screaming and hollering and carrying on.
Yeah.
So this is a easy way. I have done it myself. It works very easily.
I would think you'd
on
have
a toddler.
Still rub it in a little bit though.
You don't really, because there's a sponge on there.
Okay. So you're not going to ever get a streak where you can...
No, I don't think you need to really rub. You just use the roller ball and use the sponge.
I know. I always doubt your fabulous.
I know,
I'm
right?
I don't know.
I'm defending.
I can't be that fabulous.
I have to present a case. But I thought it was really cool, and might be a lot of people out there that have never used it. Something like that.
Okay, we'll put it on the website.
We will.
Check it out.
$15 on Amazon. Bargain.
All right.
So that's the fabulous find for this week.
Good one.
Okay, introducing a topic that I think will be helpful for a lot of different people. I was reading an article it was actually written by a preschool teacher about preschool readiness. So I think this will help grandparents and parents know and help a child to get ready for preschool, because that is a big milestone and a big change from day-to-day staying at home or with a daycare or wherever they are.
Yeah, because I know my grandson, he's going to start daycare. They finally got it accepted 3 years later.
Oh, wow.
But he's only going to go 3 days a week. And I don't know if they ready them or not. I don't know how much they can focus on that. So I'm really interested in this to see how I can help when I am with the grandson to help prepare.
Yeah, I thought it was super interesting because there's also a wide variety of daycare. Some do some educational things, some don't, which all is great, whatever is the best environment for the children. But I think there are good markers that grandparents and parents can look for just to help so the child is properly prepared and not overwhelmed.
All right, let's hear it.
So one of the things they did mention that although ABC, shapes, colors, and numbers are great, there's a lot of other ways to get a child ready because they will learn those skills in preschool anyway. And so they said one of the most valuable things is to have the children or child experience a lot of different type of experiences. So whether it be go out to the park, go to the zoo, go to a sporting event, play.
All right, I've mastered that then.
A+ for that,
Because
for sure.
I have, one, I can't sit still myself.
Same.
So every week when I watch my grandson, I always have something we have to do. Like, for example, today, we went to the 3 paint stores to get the color paint that I needed.
What color? Oh, for your house?
For my house. And then
I thought you meant for a project with him.
No. It was he runs errands with me, and then we do something fun for him. So we did that, and then we went to the park at the Bay, which is usually a great experience, but camps have started.
I was going to say, and it's the height of summer tour season here.
So it was between 5th graders and 8th graders at this park, or, with all the swings and everything. They were going insane. So he got a lot of exposure to like knowing he would run up to something and the big kid would get on it and he'd step back. Like he learned some really good social skills today.
Well, that's a good point because when they're outside, which we've talked quite a bit about the importance of being outside in fresh air, anytime a child is outside, they're going to be learning new vocabulary, new language, because they're not just hearing from you or their parents, they're hearing from a wide variety of different people.
Well, it was funny. These young girls were being obnoxious, to be honest, and he started mimicking their fake screams.
That's hilarious.
But we do so many things. The zoo, the aquarium, museums. I mean, he's getting a lot of exposure. So I'm glad I'm on track for that.
Yes, great decisions you're making there. I'm the same. I like to be out and about a lot. So we're making good choices without even knowing it.
Yeah, that's right. It's natural instinct.
Yeah, exactly. So the second tip is, and we've talked about this a lot, and I think people have heard it a lot, but this actually gives you reasons why. Read to a child every night. There's something called the 30 million word gap with children who have not been read to regularly because they've heard 30 million less words by the age of 4 than kids who are regularly read to. Isn't that crazy?
That's a huge number.
You always hear read to your kids, but that was kind of staggering to me. Vocabulary and language are very closely connected to reading. So when you're reading to a child, it's good to talk, ask questions, see if what they're thinking about what's being read. It encourages language development as well. But they're saying that is the single most important tip for preschool readiness.
I completely believe that, especially because they learn objects that way. They learn so many things. When I'm reading, I'll say, where is that? What is that? Where's the color? And so he's constantly...
The interaction is amazing.
Yeah, and he's constantly picking up new things that he knows now. So, I mean, it's more than just reading and they're sitting afar. Like, you have to really engage with them.
Right. And it makes them, I think another advantage to doing that early is I think then they learn how to enjoy books, how to sit still and do it. Where if you don't do it initially and then try to throw it in at 3, I think you might, I'm not to say that you shouldn't do it because I think you should, but I think it's going to be a harder hill to climb because they haven't been exposed to it their whole life. We all know it's a good idea, but that kind of tells you why it's a good idea.
But that statistic is incredible.
I know. It blew my mind too.
Mm-hmm.
The third tip is something that is kind of obvious, but I think it's good to be said. Let them be bored. It's really good not to entertain kids, not to say you shouldn't get on the floor and play with them, but there's times where they just need to learn how to entertain themselves and stay away from the screens. We've talked ad nauseum about that. But in order for their imagination and creativity to really grow, they need to learn how to be bored, and this teaches them how to self-regulate. And I never thought about it in that aspect as far as being bored, how it's tied to emotions and being able to control the emotions.
I feel like we had a guest on that talked a little bit about that, but you're right. And you have to get stuff done too. So while you're doing the dishes or while you're cooking dinner, you can't be constantly entertaining them as well. You've got to say, okay, go play on your own in your own space so that, they can use their imagination and do that. And otherwise, how do you get anything done, to be honest?
Well, and if they're not in front of a screen and having to figure out how to entertain themselves, yes, they might throw a temper tantrum that they can't watch the TV, but at the same time, when they realize that the tantrum's not going to work, they will eventually learn how to self-regulate and control those emotions.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really good tip. Tip number 4 was tell the child no and give consequences. Educators say one of the toughest things in preschool, TK, or kindergarten is trying to instruct children who have never been told no. This was definitely a topic with another guest of ours,
Yep.
but good to be reminded.
Easier said than done, but we understand it's required.
Well, it's easier said than done for grandparents than parents, I feel like. Well, maybe not with the gentle parenting movement.
True. I can tell you my grandson right now. So my daughter's about to deliver her baby. That's a whole other thing. She's going to come early. But he is sensing something. So right now he is not listening. He will not take no. He's throwing tantrums. Like it's
when he's young.
Yeah, he's going to be 20 months next month, right? So he's nearing the terrible twos, I guess. But it's a challenge right now. So I'm constantly like battling that because I help,
right,
take care. So if you're a grandparent that maybe just comes for a visit once in a while, yeah, I could see it's going to be easier for you. But if you're involved in trying to help raise the child, you got to take that seriously and help nip that in the bud.
Right. And the reason they're saying is children who believe they can have what they want when they want are used to that. And when there's 20 kids in the classroom, it's not feasible for every kid to be getting what they want when they want. And to make the transition more seamless, it's really important that they've already learned how to deal with the consequences of being told no.
You know what? I think right now I really have to practice that with my grandson because he's not at the age where he's learned to share yet, but he will touch kids all the time. Like we'll go to the park, we'll go to the museum. If they're wearing an Elmo shirt or a shirt with a truck or something, he'll poke them to say, truck, Elmo,
Yeah, he's still young though.
I know, but I'm thinking like, how do you teach that? Because those are things when they go to preschool. I mean, they're in daycare, they're going to have to learn it. Hopefully by preschool, they'll be old enough to know not to do that.
Right. I feel like definitely by preschool, just kids not reacting well is going to solve that problem very quickly.
That's true.
And then the final tip I thought that is super informative for grandparents to be able to do with the kids is to practice fine motor skills because the kids need the muscles once they start school for writing. So it's the small motor skills in their fingers and hands.
What are some of the ways they do that?
So they said one great way is Play-Doh. Squishing, squeezing, pressing builds those important muscles. Another thing that they mentioned that I hadn't heard of that I looked up is it's a pink Theraputty. So it's the same idea, the way it molds, but it looked pretty cool.
I have not done Play-Doh because I just do not want to deal with that mess.
Oh, Play-Doh doesn't bother me, the mess of Play-Doh.
I mean, I guess if you just do it in a safe place, not near a carpet or anything.
Right. They say this Theraputty, you can hide little gems in it so that they undo it so they find them, I guess. Kind of fun activities with that. The other things suggested were scissor skills, hole punchers, stringing beads, anything that's using your hands and building up the little muscles in your hands, because I guess it is a big change when you're in school having to use all your little finger muscles.
That's interesting. My grandson loves to pick up the tiniest little things.
Oh, my granddaughter as well.
So
and she'll be able to find
stringing beads. Of course, I'll have to watch out so he doesn't swallow them. But
you can do big beads too.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, they make big beads.
Well, I just was thinking of like the pinching your fingers. You'd want them to be little.
Right. Or even the coordination of putting them on a string too, I think is probably helpful. But I hadn't thought of that. Of course, these are things you do in everyday life when you're playing or doing arts and crafts, but to actually go with a plan of building up those muscles, I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And like I said, these are all tips from a preschool teacher that has taught for more than 20 years.
I love it.
So I thought that was super interesting of ways we can help the parents get those kids ready and make it as painless as possible, because I remember preschool was a big change. My kids had been home with me prior to preschool, so it was definitely a big transition.
Sounds good. Okay, I've got my to-do list for the week then with my grandson. So Sharon, I mentioned earlier, I think my daughter's going to go early. So who knows when our next podcast will be.
Oh, exciting.
She announced the baby a month before her due date is 8 pounds.
Wow, and she's such a little thing.
And they gain like a pound to a pound a week.
So now what's the expected date?
And she may be breech. So we're trying to figure out what they do. So she'll find out tomorrow if she's going to go and have a C-section or if the baby's turned, whatever. We'll figure it out. But I have a feeling she is going to go early. And that means that I'm going to have to watch the grandson more, especially if she has a C-section. Like she'll be in the hospital longer and stuff like that. So I was just thinking the other day, when our daughters had their first baby, we were there at the hospital waiting for it to happen. We saw our grandchildren.
Oh, no, I wasn't.
You weren't?
Nope. My daughter's water broke and she had to have an emergency C-section a month before. So she delivered at 36 weeks.
How long did it take for you to see the baby?
Well, no, I was in the car immediately, let the dogs out and went to the hospital. But
okay, so you got to see
but I wasn't
right away.
Well, I guess I was waiting for the operation to be completed.
That's what I mean. So
yes.
You got to see the baby right away.
I thought you meant like waiting for a long labor and all that.
No. I meant like you got to be there when the baby was born and got to see her right
Correct.
away.
Well, and the nurse was so awesome because I was just chilling in the waiting room and I'd already met the nurse. So when they were transporting them to their room, she called me over. So I was the very first person to see the baby outside of the parents.
Aw, see?
So I was like super excited about that.
That's right. And so when my daughter had my grandson, we were there within like 2 minutes of the birth. Like we saw when they were weighing him and all that stuff. Right? We were in the room. So now I'm going to have my grandson I've got to watch. So it's going to be a completely different experience.
Completely different, right?
Especially if she does have a C-section. Who knows how long she'll stay in the hospital? When, I'm going to bring the grandson, who knows how he's going to react. So I think I'll have a good story to tell from that experience.
Well, I can't wait to hear about the successful delivery of the little baby girl.
Well, not so little, I guess.
Yeah, or bigger than we expected, baby girl.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe she needed a second opinion. We'll see.
But anyway, best of luck to her.
Yeah, so lots to come. I know we have a lot of other ideas that we're going to be talking about in the next several episodes. So looking forward to it.
Yes, thank you again for listening. Please do us a huge favor and subscribe, download our episodes because that really, really helps us and gets the word out. We love you listeners.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the podcast so we can continue to grow our community. And follow us on Instagram at Working Grandmas Podcast, on Facebook at The Grand Balance, a Working Grandmas Podcast, and join our LinkedIn group, Working Grandmas. You can also email us at info@workinggrandmas.com or message us through any of our social media platforms.